Look at your hands right now. However clean they look, they are covered in oil, dead skin, and bacteria you cannot see. Now imagine never washing them with anything except plain water for your entire life. No bar, no bottle, no lather. That was the reality for most humans who ever lived, because soap, the thing sitting in your shower right now without a second thought, is a genuinely difficult chemical reaction to stumble onto by accident. And yet somewhere, thousands of years ago, someone figured it out anyway, using nothing but fire, fat, and ash. Today, it's one of the most universal products on Earth. The global soap and personal cleansing market is worth well over $30 billion a year, and that number doesn't even include the shampoo, detergent, and hand sanitizer built on the exact same underlying chemistry. An invisible daily habit turned into one of the largest consumer categories in the world. If the idea that soap is basically ancient chemistry blows your mind a little, subscribe now. This channel exists for exactly that feeling. Here's what makes soap especially hard to trace. It doesn't just decay like wood or bone. It dissolves. It washes away by design. The very thing that makes it useful is the same thing that makes it vanish from the historical record almost instantly. So historians aren't digging up bars of ancient soap. They're digging up the recipes, cuneiform tablets, papyrus scrolls, the rare written instructions someone thought were important enough to carve into clay or ink onto reed paper. And one of those tablets happens to be the oldest known written soap recipe on Earth. Discovered in ancient Babylon and dated to roughly 2800 BC, it describes boiling fat with wood ash and water, a process called saponification, the exact chemical reaction that still makes soap today. The Babylonians weren't necessarily using it to bathe. Evidence suggests it was used mainly for cleaning wool and textiles, but the chemistry, fat plus alkaline ash equals a substance that lifts grease and dirt in water, was already understood nearly 5,000 years ago, entirely through observation and trial and error, with zero concept of the chemistry happening underneath it. A 5,000-year-old recipe that still works exactly the same way today. If that surprised you, drop a comment. I read every single one. Ancient Egypt developed its own version independently. The Abruz Papyrus, an Egyptian medical text dating to around 1550 BC, describes combining animal and vegetable oils with alkaline salts to create a soap-like substance, used both for treating skin conditions and for washing. Egyptian evidence suggests regular bathing was already tied to religious and social expectation. Priests in particular were required to bathe multiple times a day as part of ritual purity, meaning cleanliness wasn't just hygiene, it was already tangled up with status and spiritual standing thousands of years before anyone wrote the word soap in any language we'd recognize. The Romans, oddly, mostly skipped soap for personal bathing. Roman bathers coated themselves in oil and scraped it off, along with the dirt underneath, using a curved metal tool called a strigil, an entirely different cleaning technology working towards the same goal. There's a popular legend that the word soap itself comes from Mount Sapo, a fictional Roman site where animal fat and ash supposedly ran down into the Tiber River and created a natural cleansing clay that women found made washing easier. Historians widely consider this a later myth rather than documented history, but the story stuck around for centuries precisely because it made intuitive sense. Fat and ash really do combine into soap, whether or not it happened exactly the way the legend claims. The version of soap most connected to the bar sitting in your shower today comes from the medieval Islamic world. In cities like Aleppo and Nablus, chemists refined saponification into a genuine craft, olive oil combined with laurel oil and an alkaline agent, cooked, cured, and aged for months into a hard, long-lasting bar. Arabic scientific texts from this period, including the work of physicians like Al-Razi, document soap-making processes in far more technical detail than anything that came before, treating it as legitimate chemistry rather than folk practice. Aleppo soap is still manufactured using essentially the same method today, making it one of the longest continuously produced consumer products in human history. If ancient recipes that are somehow still exactly correct today are your thing, go watch our episode on the toothbrush next. It's got the exact same kind of twist. That knowledge moved into Europe largely through trade and the Crusades, eventually landing in Castile, Spain, where a similar olive oil-based hard soap became known as Castile soap, prized specifically because it used only vegetable oil instead of animal fat, making it gentler and less prone to spoiling. France took the tradition further in the port city of Marseille, and in 1688, King Louis XIV issued a royal decree formally regulating what could legally be called Marseille soap. Requiring pure olive oil and specific production methods, one of the earliest documented cases of a government stepping in to protect a consumer product's authenticity centuries before anything resembling modern trademark law existed. For most of history, though, soap remained expensive enough that owning a bar at all was a marker of wealth. Many governments taxed soap directly as a luxury good. Britain's soap tax, in place for well over a century, kept prices artificially high enough that regular bathing with true soap stayed a privilege of the upper class, while poorer populations relied on ash, sand, or plain water well into the industrial era. Quick reminder, if you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We take apart one everyday object like this every single week. The industrial era is what finally made soap universal. In 1807, English chemist Andrew Pears developed a clear, refined glycerin soap, marketed heavily as a luxury item that, ironically, helped normalize daily washing as a habit for the growing middle class. Then, in 1879, Procter & Gamble accidentally created a soap that floated. A factory worker left a soap mixing machine running too long, whipping excess air into the batch, and rather than scrap it, the company shipped it anyway. Customers loved that it never sank to the bottom of the wash basin, and Ivory soap became one of the first mass-marketed, affordable bars in America, built entirely on a mistake nobody bothered to fix. And that is where this story bends the same direction the others have. Because modern soap chemistry didn't stop at simple fat and ash. 20th century manufacturers developed synthetic detergents and antibacterial additives. Chemicals like triclosan, marketed as stronger, more effective versions of something ancient civilizations had already solved perfectly well with natural ingredients. But research eventually found that many antibacterial additives provided no meaningful benefit over regular soap and water for most everyday use, while potentially disrupting the skin's natural bacterial balance and contributing to antibiotic resistance, findings significant enough that the FDA banned several common antibacterial chemicals from consumer soap in 2016. We spent 5,000 years refining a substance that already worked, until part of that refinement started working against the very skin it was meant to protect. So here's the honest answer. Soap wasn't invented once by one civilization. It was Babylonian fat, and ash used on wool, Egyptian oil, and alkaline salt used in temples. A probably fictional Roman legend that happened to describe real chemistry, and Islamic chemists in Aleppo who turned a household trick into a documented science, each solving the same basic reaction independently, centuries and continents apart. Tonight, somewhere, a factory is stamping out millions of identical bars in under a second. And somewhere else, someone in Aleppo is aging a bar of soap for 6 months using a process almost nobody has changed in 1,000 years. If you want the next everyday object taken apart like this one, subscribe, because the next video is already coming.